Okay, we're going to move into the wonderful world of taxes here. So, for many, many years, I have used TurboTax. Their parent company, Intuit, will send me an email toward the end of whatever the current tax year is, on or about October 1st, end of September, saying, could you please go out and check that your account is, actually I went too far here, like right about there. Okay, so check your account, make sure everything's up to date. The product will be available on or about such and such. They'll tell you what the price is. It's always hung around $70 for several years now. Then they'll send you another message indicating, oh, yep, your order's going to be processed soon, and now yet another one saying your order is ready. So you can then go ahead and download it. And they'll step you through that. It will be downloaded to a folder of your choice, like any other software. It typically will, I shouldn't say that. It should go to the download folder, but you can indicate it to go to another folder if you want. In fact, we'll come to that in just a moment, where I create a folder for all the tax stuff. I use the desktop version. Roach uses the online version. I don't know what the difference is. I've seen one tutorial with the online version. It looks virtually the same in terms of the user interface, I would say. So I just continue to order this. I don't think there's any difference in the price. Now, this is an important point here. Number 3, if we no longer itemize deductions until the next time, maybe there's a catastrophic medical expense, then TurboTax filing is going to be pretty easy. Really, our taxes aren't going to be any harder than Ted's, except for the fact that we have a bunch more 1099-Rs, whereas he has one W-2 and I think the equivalent for unemployment this year. So each year I create a folder. As you can see, there's the string: documents, finances, taxes, Y, all, and then where Y is the year. So in other words, if we go back to the File Explorer here, finances, taxes, insurance, 2020, and you can see there's a folder for taxes. And then down below here, this is where I have all this stuff for these 1099-Rs. And by the way, that listing is the same listing you're going to see right down here, which we'll get to in just a moment. All these documents should be present before you begin to work on things. Now, in theory, you could start earlier because some of them don't change from year to year, as I note here, like Honeywell, IBM, U.S. Bank pensions, and others you could calculate if you wanted to go out and add up all the deductions from that checking or bank reconciliation workbook we had. But to be honest, you can't file it until you have the 1099-R in hand, because then the government, you can't file before the government has it. So in terms of these various forms, most of them I download from websites, and I'll discuss that when we get to the website URLs, crucial websites video. But this year is a little bit of an oddball because going forward, if we're not itemizing deductions, then we don't need things like the Chase 1099 or the U.S. Bank, because we're not going to need it for property taxes or mortgage interest or for interest on a home equity loan. This one, this is again a little bit of an odd one. This is for Grand Mesa Music. That's the royalties for my concert band piece, and those are mailed. He doesn't obviously set up a website for me or for people to download from, so he just mails it. I don't have any more income from Wells, so we can ignore that. Yes, we'll still get IBM, Honeywell. These two were sort of, or there were two of them, I'm not sure why, for this Oracle settlement, but this was a one-off class action suit, so you're not going to see that again. PERA, yes. Teachers, yes. U.S. Bank, retirement, yes. And then Parable this year was or Thrive and Parable was a little bit screwy. They actually sent 4 1099-Rs, and you say, why did they do that? Because we always get 2, and the reason for that is because our monies are in separate accounts. You've heard that lecture many times, and I ask it many times, and they always give me the same answer. So Now that's why there are two. But then this year there were four. Well, that's because remember in the mid-year they broke off from Thrivent. Parable did, and I think probably because they're different legal entities, they needed to generate separate 1099Rs. So when we get to that page on TurboTax, it's going to cause your eyes to hurt because there's just this mishmash of 1099Rs, all with the same name. But next year it'll be more straightforward. And then finally is the SSA 1099. It's one document. It's actually two forms. I don't know why I just loaded them together because they came at the same time. There may be other, point 5 here, other income. And the reason for that is like the sales of my choral pieces or possibly the work I did for these guys in Iowa. The person, like in the case of the people in Iowa, they don't have to generate a 1099 for me unless they have paid me more than so much money in a current year. And I don't remember what that threshold is. But so if there were some earnings, it would be showing up as stuff that was deposited in the bank reconcile that is in the other video. So, and you want to report income. First of all, you want to be honest. And secondly, even if there is no 1099, secondly, by reporting it that way, you can then also take business expense against that income. And that's really about it in terms of the basics of, or the kind of the backstory here. Let's go ahead and open up TurboTax, and I do have it. Okay, so now I have TurboTax open, and there are two tax returns out here. We're going to ignore the forward planning one for the time being. Now this is the this return is the one that's actually been filed already, and because of that, there's a few things that I can't show, but they're not really important here, and it made more sense to do it from, or to do this demo from that actual file. I should mention over here, because I did it as I shut off the screen for a second, I opened it up. You will often get a note on your screen saying updates are out there, do you want to update? And the answer is always yes, you do want to update, because it could be both corrections to calculations. More typically what it is that there are forms that excuse me, the government hadn't yet finished up in the prior version of the software that you loaded. And it got worse under the Trump administration. Everything kept coming in later. So I hope that turns around, because it's annoying. But anyway, so let's go ahead and open up here and we'll say continue. This takes sometimes a long time to open, so I'll just go ahead and this next point here, you can allow the product to walk you through each section sequentially or take it on your own. And the section might be like wages, earnings versus deductions. And the distinction is kind of a soft one between walking through and going your own, because you'll want to start with the walkthrough, but later on you will get to the point you want to do it on your own, because you may have to come back and fix something, and you can jump right, as you'll see in a moment, to the page and go right in and edit it there rather than going through all the steps to get to that point. It just is a faster way to do it. All right, so now the form is open, and we'll do it more or less as a walkthrough just to start out. So it says you're beginning you and your family. So this is all the kind of the tombstone information, which obviously isn't going to change from year to year. And you can either go down here to continue and it'll bring you up to this next tab, or you could have just clicked on the federal taxes yourself. So we'll look at the wages and income. And here's the distinction where they say walk me through, or I'll choose what to work on. Well, if I say walk me through everything, because I already completed and filed the form, it really has this, it gets the same point. So, and you can see here, this is, I'm going to point out along the way, because some of the stuff we're seeing out here is not going to be relevant going forward. Again, because we don't have itemization going forward. Now, so as we look at these screens, remember this is what has already been submitted for tax year 2020. And they're saying, well, did you get a refund in 2019? And the answer is yes, we did. And then there's this 1099 NEC versus MISC. And I don't understand the difference between these two. I think somehow or other, it seems like this NEC supersedes the MISC. And this is just for me with my website or composer income, uh, where I would receive either that form or the MISC. And like I say, I didn't even research the difference. I just took what Wells gave me, and I think there was one other entity that gave me one for last year. So the big darn deal is way down here. So this is our mix of both. Here's all the 1099R from everything. Parable, the biggie, of course, but then also IBM, US Bank, PERA, and so on. And then the Social Security amount as well. And then there's this business and income expense, which shows up. And that's where I go out and scrape and scrounge to every little thing I can possibly point to as an arguable business deduction of some sort. And if you wanted to update any of these, like for instance, let's say we hadn't filed yet. We haven't gone through the review. We're still work in process. Like for instance, you can click right here to update. And you notice what it'll do. It will bring up all of those various 1099R entries. Now this is where it's just for this year confusing. You see you have those National Financial Services 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Well, that's the Thrivent parable thing that will, I'm assuming, not exist next year. And for what it's worth, each of these is going to correspond to a particular 1099R. So let's just say, for instance, let me take the simple one, the state of Minnesota here. And you can see if you were doing it, stepping through, it's going to say, well, who does it belong to? And you can say, this is for Kate. And then you can see this stuff here. And I think I mentioned earlier, I think this stuff is brought through from the prior year. And the only change would be if somehow the address changed or the provider changed, like was the case with US Bank a few years back. So if I compare this amount to, so I've now opened up the Teachers Retirement Association, and if I scoot it over here so it's a little more visible, you can see that all of the address stuff squares with what's on TurboTax, and then these boxes here correspond to the boxes down below. And there's a very repetitive pattern. It's always going to be a normal distribution. Notice that you have a federal and state payee or ID number that again won't change from year to year. And there's the state number, and you sometimes have to squint as to where the hell do they have it. So there's the state number on the form, 8780937, which is correct. And the state distribution amount and the federal distribution amount are always going to be the same. Some other places that might not be so, but it's the same for us. Now, all of these, notice that this is across the board. We don't do any tax withholding. And I changed that process last year, so we're now going completely to estimated payments, which really is a much smarter way to do it. It's really clean, it's easy to manage, and you'll see that in the video where we talk about, I think where I go into the critical websites. So this is just a very repetitive drill to pound all of these different 1099Rs in. And shown here, they'll have some follow-on questions, stuff that's generally not relevant to us. Something like this, know this money, usually you have to positively say yes or no. Like over here, I don't know why it is it seems they usually ask this, but not always. Was it from a qualified plan? Yes, you're always from a qualified plan. Did you do some of the money from the state of Minnesota? Did something else with it? Yes. You never moved the money to another retirement account. Any periodic payments? And this one, for whatever reason, the default is incorrect. So you want to say, yes, she got regular payments from this retirement account. And as 24 of the first year, she began getting payments. And the answer is no, started getting payments in 2019 or a prior year. And then it says, was the amount used in box 2A, the taxable amount. And if you went back and looked at that form, Then on this page, for the years you receive these distributions, so the amount shown in box 2A uses the taxable amount, and the answer is always going to be yes. You can pull up the 1099 form again, and there's the 2A. It's really hard to read there, but there's the 2A amount, 22,980, which you could do a back if you want to go back and look at the form, but we don't need to do that. So continue, and then you're back at the top here. So that's just the drill for all of those. And if you go back to wages and income, I hesitate to go into this 1099 MISC stuff because, you know, as long as I'm alive and I'm earning income, I can figure this out and do it. If I were to somehow die and it's mid-year and I've already earned some money and there were some tax deductions, it's really not worth the effort to figure out those deductions. They help now a little bit because you know, anything because I mean, it feeds my software habit. I can deduct stuff that's kind of, you know, useful for web work and my composing work, but in the end, it's not saving that much money. I mean, this gets into stuff like even taking a housing or a home office expense, the auto mileage expense, that kind of stuff. I think it's just way too arcane to try to explain for now. If I get motivated at some point, I can go back and revisit that. But it's such a relatively small amount. I don't think it's worth fussing about. Okay, so I just want to mention the Social Security questions are just a little bit different because the way the form is presented is a little bit different. And by the way, you can see here, this is Bob and Kate. Last year was the last time we had any federal tax withheld. And it's one of the stupid things in Social Security that you can withhold the federal, but you can't withhold the state. And that's why I said, well, the heck with it. I'm not going to withhold anything. We'll just do it all through estimated, because otherwise it's just confusing. And there are some other questions. And no, we didn't get lump sum payments this year for prior years. And I guess that's it. Okay, so over to deductions and credits. And I'll say walk me through everything, but I think it will, again, just bring me back to that summary page. Yes. So here's the good news or bad news, depending on how you want to look at it. As I say, without itemizing, you're not going to care about mortgage interest, property taxes, donations to charity, car registration fields or amounts. And we don't have personal property tax in Minnesota. Virginia had it, but we don't. There's medical expenses. That was the big deal this year. So everything from above here is kaput going forward. Now down here, estimated taxes. That is important because that's showing what I paid on a quarterly basis to the government in lieu of withholding. And you can look at that detail right here. It was oversized in the first quarter it was very large payment because at that point I didn't think we would be able to itemize. So we had to pay in more because our income would be more. But then you made the decision to go to Hazelden, or we made the decision, whatever. So then for the rest of the year, you can see I lowered the amount. And we'll get into how you create and post those estimated taxes on the federal and state sites in that other video, as I mentioned. And you notice there was that one little oddball, or you may have noticed, it went by pretty quick. Go back a page here. So this was all the estimated. And then notice there was this 186 amount. Well, that was that for that 1 month. I think we were still deducting federal income tax from Social Security. So you shouldn't see that anymore. So that's it for the federal. Now you can look at these other tax situations if you have nothing else to do, but they don't apply to us. And then there is, now let me go back to the outline. after completing the federal, you run a check to see if anything is missing. So there will be you can run this review, and there's a similar after you get done with the state. And they may require you, as it says here, to go back in and fill in something that was missing. And you say, well, why did they catch it the first time around? Well, it's sort of a data dependency thing. You may have, if it were like baseball, you have 9 innings. Well, maybe you enter something in the 3rd inning of completing TurboTax, and then you enter something in the 6th inning of TurboTax, and there's a relationship between those two. Well, they can't check the first thing you entered until the second thing has been entered. So they're comparing across fields, as I think is the rationale. And it seems to happen most often with charitable deductions for some reason, which, again, you're probably not going to have going forward. Now, the state, after the federal, the state's just a no-brainer in Minnesota. And we can bring that up, and I can, again, you wouldn't have to do this because you're not going to be living in 2 states going forward, but I just wanted to show you the kinds of questions they will step you through. So what this is here is that, exactly as it says, these are kinds of things where the state rule doesn't conform with the federal. And they're just real oddball things that the state decides to give a break to you for tax purposes that the federal didn't. And I've never found any of these relevant here. So you can just pretty much hammer through no, 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 no. Don't check off anything. Like so. Didn't make a contribution. Here, for whatever reason, they actually force you to fill in the little radio button. No, we're not doing that. No, we don't have that. No, we don't have that. And we're never in the alternative minimum tax. We don't make enough money to do that. Working family credit, that's not relevant. None of the above. None of the above. Taxes paid in Wisconsin, there's reciprocity between the states, and we don't have to worry about that, obviously. So we weren't in a combat zone. They ask you to go back and pull in your prior amounts here, which I'll show you. You can, because I print off a PDF copy of that if you need that. So there's no penalty for underpayment. I don't do that wildlife thing. I don't contribute to the things that were registered to vote that are just trying to project to do. It's not a new address. Blah 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 blah. Tax balance due. So I didn't even talk about any of this before, but as you can see for this year, we owed a little bit on each. Now, having said that, that's really very, very remarkably close. I've never understood the logic of people who pat themselves on the back and say, boy, I'm getting a whopping refund this year. Well, to me, that means you were stupid because you were over withheld or paying more on estimated than you should have been. If anything, you should owe a little bit, but not enough to get into a penalty situation. So anyway, and then you can do the review for the state, and then the file. I'm not going to belabor this here. It's really pretty straightforward. They'll ask you some questions, and the rules around it are over here on the outline side. You can transmit both the federal and the state electronically. The federal filing is free. The state has a fee that you can pay with a credit card, Visa. If you owe money, which is the case here, it's handled as a withdrawal from U.S. Bank, and the bank information has already been entered. And if you continued on here, you'd see where that is, and it's the routing and transit number that which are been the same forever. And this is a subtle point, but you can indicate you can file immediately, but you can indicate you don't want to pay until, say, the 15th of April, or since it's been extended in 2021, 17th of May. So those don't have to be the same dates. Now, I went ahead and indicated I'll pay it right away, I'll file it right away, but I'll pay it on April 15th. I could go ahead and change it to May 17th, but it's not worth the fuss. Now, if in the past you were getting a refund, then that just becomes a direct deposit into the U.S. bank account. Now, I mentioned here TurboTax will follow up with status emails. And so here's an example of that. So it will tell you, that you filed or they give you a confirmation, and it's been accepted by the state and by the federal. So that's a good thing. You want that obviously to be the case. You have the option to print out a PDF version of the returns, which I do. And that comes up, I think, along the way when you're filing. But you can also, I think, print here. And you can get the choices to what you want to do. And they give you kind of a bewildering list of choices, because you want just the basic forms required for filing, or you want all the forms for your records, or, you can mix and match as you wish. And I print for both the federal and the state. And just so you see what that looks like, if I go, this is back in that taxes folder, it actually prints both the federal and the state, if I recall right, in the same file. Okay, so the PDF is open here. The only problem is it's too big for the screen. So let's take that. So the first whole big chunk of it is the federal. And it even tells you, like, if you had, it even tells you what your estimated amounts were. And by the way, here it is correct. And it probably the 15th, maybe they moved it out to the 18th because of weekend, or would that be maybe Martin Luther King's birthday? Some reason like that. And if I skip ahead, then you can see there's the Minnesota summary, filing instructions, and then finally the Minnesota form, which is the, I guess it's further down here, the M1 form. So, and again, that's not mailed. Don't mail it anymore. That's what you're paying the, whatever it was, $25 to get it transmitted automatically. So I think that's all I need to show about taxes for now. So I will sign out.